Okay, guys, elections are over. And I wanted to do a really quick recap of Dallas County elections. Those of you that have been following the early voting issues that we had, yes, those were severe, and we've received hundreds of declarations of truth that we are submitting and gathering from voters and election workers alike. And on election night here in Dallas County, as you know, we have over 470 locations for election day voting. And what's so interesting about election day is that not only how many we had, locations we had, but we still had the same problems. Tabulators were going down, poll books were going down. We had people waiting hours in line to vote, 2.5, 3 hours in line to vote. Voters were calling our rapid response line. But what was really interesting, and you may want to look into this yourself, is that the results on election day, right? The polls shut down at 7 p.m. and then the poll workers will then close out that voting station or polling station, and they will bring the jump drives and other equipment to a regional center. Here in Dallas County, we had 10 regional centers. And then they hand off their jump drives would have the votes on them to a Dallas County Election Department worker, and they would take them from the regional site to central count. That's where I was at. Myself and my husband and many others were watching how our votes were being processed. So, interesting fact, do you know that when they bring those jump drives to central count, there's no reconciliation? None. What they do is simply take those drives out of the little bag, it's like a bank bag, and they put them directly into the central accumulator. That's it. They don't verify it against a tabulator. They don't verify it against the poll books. They don't count it against the actual paper ballots themselves. None of that. I think I must have forgotten that because I was shocked on election night. And yes, we were there till about 3 in the morning. So this is something else that you might think about. On election day, if the polls close at 7 p.m., why did it take until 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning for all of the drives to be turned in? I don't know how many hours that is. That's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2. That's like 8 hours. What took so long when there's no accounting that has to happen? You might want to ask your local party why that was and what they're doing about it. Okay, so enough about election day. We still do have some dynamics happening at Central Count. We have a partial audit that's happening. The Secretary of State has requested that. I think that's according to Chapter 127 of the Texas Election Code. We still have the ballot board meeting, and they're adjudicating the provisional ballots. I think we have like 3,000 of those ballots still left to go. So there's still things happening. And why are there states that don't have their results in? Isn't every state using machines? I thought using machines was supposed to speed everything up. I don't understand that disconnect either. I know that the states that are using ranked choice voting, I know that that's a little bit more complicated. I know that Alaska just revoked. They had it on the ballot, so no more ranked choice voting for Alaskans after this election, which is kind of exciting. It's my home state, so I know. So let's move on. Okay, how about the absolute division that's happening right now in our country, right? We know that about 50% of the country is celebrating and 50% are grieving. It happens every election cycle. There's a winner and a loser. And this, I believe, is the key to what makes our country great. There are some, I think most, may have a couple of bad days because their candidate didn't win. They shake it off and they move on, right? They go to work. They might be a little bit, blue for a couple of days. There are others that simply get stuck, that can't seem to move through it. Now, for those of you that are suffering right now, I know how you feel. Believe me, I have felt that before. And you know what I found? Is that little tricks and tips to get through it. one thing that I did is I was able to start focusing locally. I turned the news off. I didn't listen to what all those talking heads were saying. And I found something that mattered to me. Now, with my husband and I, we own a hair salon. And so my husband, once a month, goes down and he cuts the homeless hair. Because to them, that matters. And he felt like he could give back. For myself, I'm really involved in local politics. I felt like I could make a difference. I felt like if I didn't like the results, then I needed to do something in order to change the results, not just complain about it. And so I did for the last several years. So when in doubt, think out really does work. And the other thing that I noticed is that, yes, I felt the grief and the pain. However, it did get easier each day. Now, I can say that I still was involved in social media. I can say that I didn't just hide, in a closet somewhere. I was still involved. So if you don't like the results, I encourage you to get involved. And the other thing that I would say is, how can we as a country start having the conversations so that we can understand each other's perspective a little bit more? I do authentically want to seek to understand. I do want to have the hard conversations. And so those women and men that are in the streets right now protesting about the concern that that nobody's going to be able to have an abortion anywhere in the United States. It'll be completely abolished by a stroke of the pen. Let's talk about that. Help me to understand how you think that a president with a stroke of the pen could outlaw abortion in all 50 states. Now, what I know to be true, and yes, I do write legislation for a living, so I do have a little bit of a different perspective, is I understand that when Roe v. Wade was turned over, it was turned over to the individual states. And the states have the ability to write laws to govern that individual state regarding abortion. With this last election that just came through, several states had much more liberal policies on abortions, unlike Texas, which has a heartbeat bill, right? So you've got different perspectives, and if you want to engage or change your state's legislation around that topic, you need to contact your state legislator, your state House rep, and your state senators that represent you. That way you can affect change in your state, because it's just not a federal issue. I promise you that. It is not a federal issue. The president, regardless of who's in power, cannot just stroke a pen and make that illegal in all 50 states. The other thing I would wonder is, I appreciate your passion for something that you believe in. For those that are in the streets protesting against this potential fear of this edict that would come down from the president regarding the right to have an abortion, I wonder, where was that same anger when it came to men and women not being able to enjoy the security of their own bathrooms? What I mean by that is, of course, Title IX, where men were allowed in women's restrooms. Boys were allowed in girls' restrooms. Where was the right of those girls for them to have autonomy over their own bodies and not have to get undressed in front of biological men? Where was the outrage when women were playing in sports that men who identified as women were allowed to come into and play sports? We had one woman who received brain damage in a volleyball game because she didn't enjoy the right of having a safe sport because men were allowed in. Where was women's rights when Women of the Year was given to a biological man? So I would be curious to understand the thread. Help me to understand how this issue is so incredibly passionate and important to that segment of society. And then the issue of girl safety in their own bathrooms or in their own sports wasn't. So I would really appreciate an authentic conversation, a hard conversation on what that looks like. And how can we have those conversations without the name calling, right? Like, can we be kind again? Could we agree to disagree again without name calling? And I'm wondering when that stopped. Because so when I was in high school, I was in debate, right? And when you go to a debate tournament, you have to be prepared to present both sides. And then when you show up at that tournament, they tell you which side that you're fighting for. So you didn't have to believe it to be true. You just had to research it and have the information. So when did that stop? When did that courageous discourse stop? Did it stop with our universities, where suddenly being safe, feeling safe was more important than knowledge and facts? Did it start with this political correctness where I may not be as politically correct as society thinks that I should be, so all of a sudden I was removed from social media because of a statement or a thought or a position or an opinion that I had? When did that change? And how can we bring it back? How can we teach our children to have differencing of opinions and still go play together? How can we teach couples to have the hard conversations? So our goal on the show, as we promised before the elections began, is that we want to have those hard conversations. We want to model those conversations. And we were going to have guests on the show that will talk about the hard things, because together, I do believe we can be kind again. And when you seek first to understand, that's when the greatest of change can happen. So with that, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsor, Color to Go by Daniel. Folks, this is the most amazing hair color. It is mailed to you so you can do it in the convenience of your home. A real person formulates it to perfectly match your hair to cover up those grays. And more importantly than the fact that it looks incredible is that the percent of the proceeds go back into our community and goes to help fighting human trafficking. So it is a for-profit, for-good company, Color to Go by Daniel. Make sure that you order yours today.